This is The Beat with Radia B, a conversation about the Charleston County Sheriff's Office in our community. Welcome to The Beat, hosted by Radia B. As many of you are aware, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And in our latest episode, we have April and Daniela here with the Victims Assistance Unit with the Charleston County Sheriff Department. Welcome. April,
Hello.
so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is April Ford. I am a victim advocate with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. I've been with the agency since, I believe, 2016. I am a survivor of homicide. Back in 2015, my brother was murdered, and I found myself in the office of a victim advocate at a police department. And just being a survivor of homicide, I understand the importance and the value of a competent and compassionate victims advocate. So I'm just here to give back what was given to me.
Awesome. And Miss Daniela, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Daniela Diaz. I am a victim advocate since 2016. I've been with the agency since 2005, and I started at the detention center as a detention officer. And the reason why I wanted to become a bilingual victim advocate is I assisted many Hispanic residents at the detention center, and I saw the need for a bilingual Spanish-speaking person to assist them, and I really wanted to be part of the other part of the equation and try to help Hispanic victims of especially violent crimes.
Awesome. How do you guys handle the day-to-day process in the Victims Assistant unit?
Well, when we arrive in the office, the first thing we do is we view the incident reports. We assign cases. We make contact with victims where the defendant is currently or in jail, and there may be a scheduled bond hearing. We attend bond hearings as a support person with the victim or on the victim's behalf. A day-to-day, we may attend order of protection court, magistrate court, preliminary hearing court. We assist victims with purchasing necessities. We visit hospitals. So there's a number of things that we do that are beyond our job description.
So tell me a little bit, what does domestic violence or intimate partner violence look like?
So domestic violence is a pattern of behaviors used to establish and maintain power and control. Domestic violence could be physical. You would see that. You would see like the bruises, the injuries. It could be emotional. It could be sexual, financial. You'll see the isolation. And in the isolation aspect, that's where the abuser tries to keep the victim, away from family. We've seen abusive animal, as well as intimidation, destruction of property as a means to intimidate.
So if somebody says, what does it sound like for family members to recognize so that they can help?
Sometimes you'll see the victim very defensive, making excuses for the offender.
Is this just a woman's issue?
Studies do show that women are more common to be victims of domestic violence. However, that could be due to men underreporting. But it's not a women's issue. It affects all genders. Sexual orientations. As advocates here at the Sheriff's Office, we assist victims with obtaining order of protections. And we recently just had a case where a man was seeking protection from his wife. In bond court, we recently had a case where a male was seeking a no-contact bond condition against his male partner. So it's not a woman's issue. I would say it's a human issue.
Okay, great. So how should someone take action in getting help?
First, the victim has to recognize there is a problem. So many times there is an abuse physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, and the person doesn't recognize that. So the first step for someone to try to seek help is to recognize there is a problem. And of course, willing to seek help for that. once that person identify that, the person that is listening, it has to not to be judgmental and try to help. And I will advise whoever is a victim of domestic violence, and not just domestic violence, but any crime, to do a report with law enforcement. In our case that we are talking about domestic violence today, there are victims that they don't feel comfortable reporting a abuse to law enforcement, and that's okay. They still can. There are other resources. There are other people that they can go to for help. They can go to a family member, friend, someone that they trust. They can even talk to someone of authority, like a minister, or you can go to the emergency room. Here in Charleston, we have my sister's house, which is a domestic violence battered women's shelter. And so there is help. There is help to get out of that situation.
All right. Well, thank you for even mentioning other resources than just the sheriff's office, other community resources, faith-based. What does the process look when a victim comes to your office? Describe that.
When victims come to the sheriff's office seeking assistance, the first thing we do is we assess safety. We just make sure that they're safe, and then we talk about their immediate needs. What your immediate needs are. Sometimes those needs are, they may need medical attention, financial resources, shelter. It's basically safety and immediate needs, and then from there we talk about whether or not we need to assist them with order of protections, because here, we draft and we file order of protection. So all the victim actually has to do is show up to court.
Awesome. So how can survivors break the cycle? Give us some pointers or some resources or information, rather, of how survivors can break the cycle.
When the person realizes that has been a victim of a crime, domestic violence, in this case, of course, leaving the abuser, it's not easy. It is rather dangerous. It's scary. And it shows that a victim tried to leave the abuser 7 times before that person actually leave the situation of abuse. And there are many reasons why the person don't want to leave the situation. It's always hope for change. And there is this cycle of abuse, honeymoon, the increase of attention, and then the abuse. But in sometimes victims blame themselves. I'm the reason why I did something wrong. That's why he reacted that way. It's hard to break the cycle.
So what happens if the cycle isn't broken and if it's passed from generation to generation? What happens?
Studies show that domestic violence begets violence. So children who witness violence at home, they're more likely to be abusers or victims themselves. Studies also show that children, that are witnessing violence at home are more aggressive towards their peers. And they also suffer from mental health issues. So it's just a cycle that, those behaviors continuing.
Wow. So what community partnerships and relationships and organizations that can help assist survivors?
Here in the Charleston area, we have different resources for survivors of domestic violence. We have my sister's house, which is a domestic violence women's shelter. We also have the Department of Crime Victim Compensation Network, and that is out of the South Carolina Attorney General's office. And we also have LISA Lifeline, we have legal services, we have National Crime Victim Center out of MUSC.
And we also have relationships with local businesses. There's a local tire shop that if we're in need of a victim is in need of tires, so donate. We have a furniture store that'll donate bed, linen to sexual assault victims. So there's a number of agencies that we have those relationships with where we could just call if there's a need.
Okay. Are there any unique challenges or barriers that you face with working with survivors?
If I'm working with the Latino Hispanic community, the first difficult that I encounter is the language barrier. And sometimes they do not have how to know how to report a crime. And there is a fear for deportation, that lack of knowledge of our laws and legal system. And we have some Spanish-speaking counselor, but we are always needing more. There is a cultural difference between our community and the Hispanic community. What is permitted in certain Hispanic-speaking or Latin American countries is not acceptable here. So there is the reason why there are certain incidents that go underreported. The victim keeps being re-victimized because she doesn't report that. She believes that's normal. That's my partner, that's my husband. He has all the right to do that. He has all the right to treat me that way. And especially if they are children in the situation, it is harder for them because sometimes the abuser is the breadwinner.
Right.
Yeah, and it's kind of the same for like the African American community. Whenever the victim does get the strength or to trust, a relative, and they come and they disclose that, they're being victimized or a victim of domestic violence and their husband or, has been abusing them, you'll have that one relative that'll, well, that's your husband.
Right.
It'll get better. And that they just tend to minimize.
How do we reach those domestic violence victims based on cultural aspects that you guys have just described in the Hispanic and in the African American communities?
Everything starts with education, and a good way to reach out to all these victims is through schools. That will be a good place to start. But it's always important, and that's what I always like to point out, is the person has to realize he is a victim. If you don't understand, you don't realize you are a victim, then you're not going to do anything. Even if other people see you as a victim, you don't want to do nothing about it, and that will perpetuate the abuse.
And that's where, our job, that's where advocacy comes in at. We get these victims, and, they tell us when we make those phone calls that, I'm not a victim. And then as advocates, we have to, state, well, the incident report says that this is what happened. And it's concerning, and we're concerned.
Do the community at large, do we have all of the resources and education we need to combat domestic violence?
The answer is no. We could use more shelters. We do have My Sister's House, which is a shelter for women and children. However, especially due to the pandemic, they're full. There's a lot more that we could do.
Can you inform our viewers of a direct way to seek help for themselves or for somebody that they know when they're in a domestic violence situation?
Sure, there is a number with the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That is 1-800-799-SAFE.
Thank you for joining us on the latest episode of The Beat, hosted by Radia B. And The Beat goes on. This has been The Beat, a conversation about the Charleston County Sheriff's Office in our community. I am Radia B. Look for future episodes by following the Charleston County Sheriff's Office on Facebook, YouTube, or wherever you go to get your podcasts.